And if you were going to go to Isle Royale and you have one day to do it, this is what we'd recommend to do. It's one of the national parks, and if you're planning on going there, you probably want to watch this video because there was quite a few things that we were not expecting. And we actually almost didn't get to go because we didn't plan far enough ahead. So, let's start off the big things about Isle Royale.
And you know what's funny? We own the Moon National Park book, which we're huge advocates for. We use it for every national park visit. And for some reason, I've read it like cover to cover, and I still didn't know half of these things. That's not to say it isn't complete. It was just unexpected.
So, the first and most obvious one is, because it's an island, you're going to have to take a ferry out to it. Now, Isle Royale sits on the Great Lakes. Technically, it's in Michigan. However, the best place to launch from, unless you want a 6-hour boat ride, is Maine. Nope, is
Maine. You have one port that leaves from Minnesota. It is 2 hours. You have another port in Michigan, the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. And that's actually like the headquarters for the national park and everything like that. And then there is a third port basically on like the very tip of the peninsula. And yeah, it takes a long time to get there. It's like the one from Minnesota is 2 hours. The one from the very tip peninsula is like 3 hours. And the one from the visitor center is like 6 hours. But I think the only one that you can do a day trip from is Minnesota.
The big thing was you need to book this in advance. So when we set out to do it, we were currently crossing Iowa, planning to go into Wisconsin and then up to Minnesota. Luckily, Alicia had the thought to, check and see how much tickets were. We, at that time, managed to get a canceled booking. We got the last 2 seats on there. At the time, it was
mid-May, and I was like, I should look for tickets. There was only 2 left in the first week of June, and they were sold out until September. So we were really, really lucky. If you're going to go to Isle Royale, you should plan like
way in
6 months in advance, or as much in advance as they will let you buy the tickets. Because we had to be very flexible because there were only 2 tickets left.
One of the other kind of confusing aspects of this is that even though you leave from Minnesota, technically Minnesota and Michigan are in 2 completely different time zones. So whereas you might be closer to Michigan, there's an hour difference in the time zone. So when we got let off the boat, he said, "We are not changing our clocks. We are operating under Minnesota time." So on the off chance that your phone caught a signal after Minnesota, but before the island, your phone may have changed time zones. That means that you need to be absolutely careful. If you go ask a national park ranger, they're going to tell you the wrong time.
Luckily, they're operating in Eastern. The Minnesota boat operates in Central time zone. So if you were on Eastern time zone, you would show up an hour early, not an hour late. Just know that you're going to have to keep track of which time zone you're on. Depending on where you launched from, there's only 1 boat per day, at least when we were going. If you miss your boat, you miss, and you'll have to stay overnight. So could be very expensive for you. Actually could be detrimental because on the Minnesota side, there is no lodge. It is a minimum 2-hour boat ride, which does not leave you a ton of time to explore the island. We managed to fit in a, 9-mile hike? All right, so we started at the Wendigo Visitor Center, and we hiked up from there up to Minogue Ridge. And we had lunch here. It was about a 3.5-mile hike. I know that the total is like 6.8. So it is time to head back because our boat leaves at 1:45 and it is currently 12:09. So now if you're going to spend a whole week on the island and stuff like that, then You have more flexibility, but it was pretty stressful. And I knew that we could get that hike done because I know us and we do a lot of hiking. And I was still stressed out that we were going to miss our boat.
So as we're on the boat ride back, I was talking to a handful of people that had just gotten off of backpacking the entire island. Now, what they had said kind of surprised me. Whereas the visitation for Isle Royale is incredibly low. It's like ranked 50th or 60th. It's down there.
I think it's 49.
However, it is one of the most revisited national parks. So backpacking and sea kayaking are the number one attractions on this island. There is no doubt of why. I mean, very few national parks do I want to go back to because, I don't know, people suck.
Or
This
you've
is
done it. Like, you've seen it. You've done it. Like Bryce Canyon. After you've been to Bryce Canyon, you've seen hoodoos. And you're like, yep, that was pretty cool. Like, I don't feel a need to go back unless I was like, oh, yeah, I really want to do this trail. Anyway, go ahead.
yes. Oh, but backpacking on this is like, it would be so cool because from where we hiked up to, you could see both sides of the island and you can stay. They have campsites in inlet bays and it would be just fantastic to go backpack with a sea kayak and just explore the island.
And we literally saw no one the entire time. After we left the visitor center and rounded the corner, there was like a large group campsite. After that campsite, we didn't see anybody. I'm butchering this. We saw no one. But we heard moose.
Let's talk about cost. Because if you're planning on going out there, realistically, especially for a day trip, cost is one of those big things that you have to weigh. The boat trip cost us about $200. That's a pretty decent chunk of change when we weren't expecting it. Every other ferry that we had gone on the Great Lakes didn't cost us that.
And this one is $100 per person.
The other important part about this is because you don't launch from a national park, they don't check your national park pass until you get to the island. So if you don't have a national park pass or you're not going to pay them for the day, then you're going to be stuck on the boat the whole time that we're there. While we're on the topic of money, it's $5 for parking. Now, it's not like $5 breaks the bank, especially when you just drop $200 for a day, to go out to an island. However, it was kind of bittersweet to come back and see a parking tag on our van. It just seemed weird for the day trip. I don't know.
Yeah. So know that if you're going to backpack, it's going to cost you $5 per day to park in their lot from the Minnesota place. I feel like an interviewer with this thing. So Kodiak, how did you feel about visiting Isle Royale?
It was just too much. No, it was great. Isle Royale was one of those places that I want to go back to.
Yeah.
Especially with such a low visitation rate. Not seeing anybody on the trail is like a godsend when you're hitting all these national parks.
It exceeded my expectations and surprised me. But also, there's so much to do. I feel like we really pushed the whole backpacking aspect of it. There's so much to do, even if you're not a backpacker. Some people are really into sea kayaking. There are plenty of just sea kayak campsites. So if you took off from one of the ports, there are some campsites that don't have any trails to them. You can only access them by sea kayak. And if you weren't into either of those, it would still be an amazing trip to take on a houseboat or just a regular boat. I know that they have anchor spots. If you weren't into either of those, it would be a great trip to just like boat around the island. There's definitely plenty to do, and I loved it. I was really in my element there. It was pretty cool. And it wasn't super skeetery on the island. And that is saying something because this was the worst, the buggiest, quite literally, buggiest trip we've ever taken. Picture rocks. It was so bad that when we got out to hike, we have footage of Kodiak trying to take a picture. In Minnesota, The deer flies were really, really bad. So I was very pleasantly surprised that Isle Royale was not super buggy. I would still bring bug spray. We had 9 tips for visiting Isle Royale. 1, book your boat ride in advance. 2, that it's technically in Michigan, but the shortest boat ride is from Minnesota. Michigan is the upper peninsula of Michigan is in the eastern time zone, which means the Isle Royale is in the eastern time zone, even though if you're launching from Minnesota, it's the central time zone. 4, it is a minimum of a 2-hour boat ride. Could be up to 6. The scenic hike we did, we saw no one, but we did hear a moose. It's known for moose, so if you're really excited about seeing moose, I would suggest going here.
Day trips are shorter than you think. Costs us a total of about $200. Backpacking is the main attraction alongside sea kayaking and hiking. And parking costs $5 per day.
We hope that these 9 tips were helpful. We encourage you to visit Isle Royale, especially if you're trying to hit all of the national parks. Subscribe because it's totally free to you and it helps us grow our channel and helps us provide more content. Like and subscribe and leave a comment. So